200 Israeli fighter jets just flew through Iranian airspace. They dropped over 300 munitions across 100 locations, and not a single aircraft was downed. Iran had just spent billions upgrading their air defenses. They quadrupled their detection systems. They tripled their interception capabilities. Iranian officials were publicly boasting about an impenetrable shield just months before this happened. And yet, Israel walked straight through it. Here's what mainstream media won't tell you. This wasn't a lucky strike. This wasn't Iran having an off day. What happened on June 13th was the result of a months-long operation that systematically dismantled Iran's defenses from the inside before a single Israeli jet ever left the ground. And here's the part that should make you stop scrolling. Iran may have actually let some of it happen on purpose. I know how that sounds. Stay with me, because by the time we're done here, you won't just understand how Israel did this. You'll understand why Iran's strategic position after this attack may be stronger than it was before it. Before we get into how Israel pulled this off, there's one detail about Iran's defense upgrades that almost nobody is reporting, and it completely reframes everything you're about to hear. To understand why June 13th happened the way it did, you need to understand what Iran built and what they chose to protect with it. Since 2024, less than a year before this attack, Iran underwent one of the most aggressive air defense expansions in its modern history. They didn't just patch gaps. They deployed next-generation systems like the Bavar 373, a domestically developed long-range platform with a 400-kilometer detection range and independent radar-equipped launchers. Iranian officials claimed it could monitor the country's airspace around the clock and rapidly restore any damaged components. The system was designed to be self-sufficient. If one node went down, others would compensate. On paper, it was a credible deterrent, and Iran's leadership knew it. They said so publicly. Untouchable was the word used. But here is the piece of foreshadowing that matters, the detail hiding in plain sight that no one connected at the time. Iran did not defend everything equally. They made a deliberate architectural choice about what to protect most. The nuclear sites received the deepest, most layered coverage. The peripheral military infrastructure, the border-facing air defense network, received what was left. That decision, made months before June 13th, is the structural crack that Israel had been mapping for years. Meanwhile, the October 2024 Israeli strikes, which I covered at the time, destroyed critical S-300 components and solid fuel missile infrastructure inside Iran. Israel appeared to back down when Iran demonstrated the ability to penetrate the Iron Dome with its own advanced ballistic missiles. But the damage from those October hits was never fully repaired. Iran's reconstruction timeline was slower than their public posture suggested. The stage was set. The crack was there. Someone just had to find the right way through it. Iran thought the weakest part of their defense had been rebuilt. They were right about the hardware. They had no idea what had already happened to the people operating it. Here's where this stops being a story about missiles and starts being a story about invisible warfare. Weeks before the first Israeli jet crossed into Iranian airspace on June 13th, Mossad, Israeli intelligence, had already been operating inside Iran. Not gathering information, acting on it. Operatives had identified and disabled key nodes in Iran's air defense network, specific radar stations, specific missile launcher control systems, the exact components that would detect and intercept incoming aircraft in the corridors Israel intended to use. When Israeli jets began their approach, Iran's air defense network wasn't just strained. In the specific zones where the strikes were directed, it was functionally blind and deaf. The eyes had already been put out, the ears had already been cut off, and the command centers that would coordinate a response, several of them were also on the target list. This is the part that elevates this beyond a conventional military exchange. Israel didn't just find a gap in Iran's defenses. They manufactured one from within Iranian territory before the attack clock even started. Over 200 aircraft, more than 300 munitions, 100 separate target locations executed in coordinated waves specifically engineered to overwhelm whatever remained of Iran's active defenses. Israel didn't send a probing force. They sent everything all at once through the holes that had already been cut. The sequence was deliberate and methodical. First wave, Western Iran's air defense array, radar installations, and surface-to-air missile launchers. The goal wasn't just to destroy individual systems. It was to establish complete air superiority over Iranian skies so that subsequent waves faced zero ground-based interception. Once the defensive grid in the West was neutralized, Israel's aircraft moved freely toward primary targets deeper inside the country. And here's the complication that shifts the entire story. Simultaneously with the military strikes, Israel hit the command centers where Iran's top military leadership was located, including figures like General Baretti. This wasn't incidental. Decapitating the command layer in real time meant that even the Iranian defense systems that were still functional had no coordinated direction. The remaining operators were effectively isolated, hardware still running, software still processing, but no one at the top to integrate the response. The result wasn't just a military failure. It was a systems failure. Every layer, physical, cyber, human, command, was targeted simultaneously, and Iran's geography made it worse. Israel is a small, dense country, relatively straightforward to defend. Iran is vast, covering that entire airspace comprehensively, especially with defense resources concentrated around nuclear sites, was geometrically close to impossible once the peripheral network had been compromised. Israel used real-time satellite data combined with the infiltrated sensor network Mossad had already mapped to identify the exact routes in and out where Iranian coverage was thinnest or already disabled. Their F-35 stealth fighters and advanced drones operated along those corridors with near zero detection probability. They had a way in. They had undefended targets. They had a route out. Everything I just described, the infiltration, the coordination, the overwhelming force, that's the story Israel once told. But there's a layer underneath it that changes the conclusion entirely. I need you to stay with me for this next part. Here is the assessment that almost no one is making publicly right now, and I want to be clear that this is analytical, not political. Iran chose this, not the attack itself, but the outcome, specifically the outcome as it relates to nuclear infrastructure. Iran's nuclear facilities, their most strategically vital assets, were not significantly degraded in these strikes. The prioritization of nuclear site defense over peripheral military infrastructure wasn't a mistake or a budget constraint. It was a doctrine. Iran made a calculated decision that losing some of its air defense perimeter, even dramatically, even publicly, was an acceptable cost if the nuclear program remained intact and advanced. Think about what that means structurally. Israel launched one of the most sophisticated military operations in modern history. They achieved air superiority over Iranian skies. They degraded Iran's conventional military air defense network, and Iran's deterrence capability, the actual leverage that makes Iran untouchable in an existential sense, survived. Now, here's the twist that recontextualizes everything from the setup. Remember those October 2024 strikes where Israel appeared to back down after Iran demonstrated its ballistic missile capability? Iran fired those missiles. They got through. And then Iran showed the world it had done something unprecedented. It had penetrated one of the most sophisticated air defense systems on Earth. That demonstration was not a lucky shot. It was a message about what Iran was choosing to reveal from its arsenal. Now, after June 13th, Iranian officials are saying something that deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed as propaganda. They claim the missiles used in recent exchanges came from older stockpiles, legacy systems, not their current frontline capabilities. That is either a face-saving statement by a government managing domestic optics after a humiliation, or it is a deliberate, calibrated signal about what has not yet been used. If it's the latter, the strategic picture inverts entirely. Israel demonstrated superior intelligence, superior technology, and superior planning. All of that is true and must be acknowledged clearly and without spin. But military dominance in a single engagement and strategic trajectory over the next decade are different things. Iran, a country that has absorbed these strikes, retained its nuclear program, and claims its most advanced weapons haven't yet been deployed, is not in the position most Western media framing suggests it's in. The protagonist in this story didn't just take a hit. They absorbed it exactly where they were willing to absorb it, and they're still standing in the position they most wanted to protect. That reframe doesn't make what happened to Iran's military less severe, but it does mean the final conclusion of this story is completely different from the headline you were handed this morning. So where does this actually leave both sides? Israel executed a tactically brilliant operation. The layered preparation, the October 2024 groundwork, the Mossad infiltration, the coordinated multi-wave strike, the command decapitation, represents one of the most sophisticated combined arms operations in modern military history. The technological gap between Israeli and Iranian conventional air defense systems was real, and it showed. Acknowledging that is not a political statement. It's an accurate reading of what happened. But here's what I want you to sit with. Israel's current trajectory as a state, not as a military, is one of deepening isolation. The more operations of this scale they conduct, the more they accelerate a process of regional alienation and international political erosion that their military capability cannot reverse. You cannot bomb your way to stable long-term security in a region where the surrounding population outnumbers you by orders of magnitude and where your primary political patron faces its own internal pressures. Iran's trajectory, by contrast, is toward becoming a regional anchor, not the dominant power, but a durable one, with a hardened nuclear deterrent, genuine national cohesion, and a strategic patience that has repeatedly outlasted its opponents' expectations. The June 13th attacks didn't resolve the Iran-Israel conflict. They may have accelerated its next phase. And that question, what Iran has not yet shown, remains open. Deliberately, 200 jets flew through Iranian airspace. Not one was downed. But the question that actually matters isn't how Israel got in. It's what Iran is saving for the response. If this analysis landed differently from what you expected, if it challenged something you thought you already knew, that's the point. Drop a comment below. If this helped you, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends, and write your thoughts in the comments. More news is coming, and I will keep you updated.